Dorothy Washington kept a shoebox under her bed. It wasn't filled with old photographs or letters or jewelry. It was filled with paper, thousands of pieces of paper, grocery receipts, every single one dating back to May 14th, 1973. Her granddaughter, Maya, found it when she was 16, helping her grandmother clean out the closet. "Grandma, why do you have all these old receipts?" Dorothy had looked at the box, at the careful way she'd organized them by year, rubber-banded into stacks. "Insurance," she'd said simply. "Insurance for what?" "Against being accused of something I didn't do." Maya didn't understand then. But when Dorothy turned 73, Maya asked again. And this time Dorothy told her the whole story. Maya recorded it on her phone, posted it to social media with the caption, "My grandma has kept every grocery receipt since 1973. Here's why." The video went viral. 50 million views in a week. Comments poured in from other Black Americans who did the same thing. Who kept receipts, who kept tags on new clothes, who kept proof of purchase for everything because being Black meant you were always one accusation away from being assumed guilty. When The Late Show called, Dorothy almost said no. She was 73 years old. She'd been a teacher for 50 years. She'd retired quietly, tended her garden, spent time with her grandchildren. She didn't need attention, but Maya convinced her. "Grandma, people need to hear this. They need to understand." So Dorothy found herself on a plane to New York, the shoebox carefully packed in her carry-on. She wouldn't check it, couldn't risk losing it. It was too important. The green room at the Ed Sullivan Theater felt strange. Dorothy sat in a chair that had probably held celebrities, politicians, people far more important than a retired school teacher from Virginia. She held the shoebox on her lap, her hands resting on the lid. "Mrs. Washington?" A production assistant appeared. "We're ready for you." Dorothy stood slowly. Her knees weren't what they used to be, neither was her back. But her mind was sharp, and her memory was sharper. She remembered every detail of May 14th, 1973, the day everything changed. David Letterman stood to greet her as she walked onto the stage. The audience applauded warmly. Dorothy smiled, but she felt the weight of the shoebox in her hands. This wasn't a pleasant story. This was 50 years of evidence that she'd needed to prove she wasn't a criminal. "Mrs. Washington, thank you for being here," David said as they both sat. "That's quite a box you're carrying." Dorothy set it on the small table between them. "This is 50 years of my life, Mr. Letterman. 50 years of proof." "Proof of what?" "That I paid for my groceries every single time for 50 years. Dorothy opened the box. Inside were stacks of receipts organized by year, rubber-banded, labeled in her careful handwriting. 1973, 1974, 1975. She ran her hand over them, all the way to last week. "Why do you keep them?" Dorothy took a breath. This was the part that hurt. "Because on May 14th, 1973, I learned that being a Black woman with groceries made me a suspect, and I never forgot it." David leaned forward. "Tell me what happened." "I was 23 years old. I'd just gotten my first teaching job at Riverside Elementary. I was so proud. My first real job, first real paycheck. I went to Henderson's Market, that's the grocery store in my town, to buy food for my apartment. Milk, bread, eggs, chicken, basic things. I remember being so careful with my budget, calculating every penny. You paid cash? Of course. I paid Mr. Henderson at the register, counted out my bills. He put them in the drawer, gave me my change, gave me my receipt. I put the receipt in my purse, put the groceries in my bag, and started to walk out." Dorothy's voice tightened, and Mr. Henderson called after me. "Excuse me, miss, let me see that receipt." The audience was completely silent. I turned around. I was confused. I just paid him 30 seconds ago. He was right there, but I opened my purse and showed him the receipt. He took it, looked at it, looked at me, and then he said something I will never forget. "Next time, make sure you actually pay before you leave." "He just watched you pay," David said quietly. "He was the one who took my money. He gave me the receipt, and he still acted like I might have stolen something, like I needed to be reminded to pay because I was black. Dorothy's hands trembled slightly. I stood there with my groceries and my receipt and my dignity in shreds, and I realized this is how it's going to be. No matter what I do, no matter how carefully I follow the rules, someone will always assume I'm a criminal. What did you do? I went home. I cried. And then I put that receipt in a box. And I decided I would keep every single receipt from every single purchase I ever made at Henderson's Market. Because the next time someone accused me, and I knew there would be a next time, I would have proof. Not just for that day, but for every day. Did he accuse you again? Not directly, but I felt it every time I shopped there. The way he watched me. The way he'd stand at the end of the aisle pretending to stock shelves, but really just making sure I wasn't stealing. The way he'd count my change slowly, like he was doing me a favor by letting me shop there. David shook his head. Did you ever shop somewhere else? There was nowhere else. Henderson's was the only grocery store in town, and I couldn't afford to drive 20 miles to the next town every time I needed milk, so I kept shopping there. And I kept every receipt. All through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even after Mr. Henderson died and his son took over, even after things got better, supposedly. Because the habit was ingrained. The fear was ingrained. The fear of being accused, the fear of not being able to prove my innocence, because that's what happens when you're black in America. You're guilty until proven innocent, and sometimes even proof isn't enough. David looked at the shoebox, at the thousands of receipts. Mrs. Washington, you said Mr. Henderson died. When? About 10 years ago. His son Michael runs the store now. He's different, kinder. He speaks to me like a person, not a suspect. But I still keep the receipts, because it's not about the Hendersons anymore. It's about never forgetting what it felt like to be treated like that, to need this much evidence just to buy groceries. Have you ever told Michael this story? No. What would be the point? His father's gone, the damage is done, and I have my shoebox. Dorothy smiled sadly. My insurance policy. David was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Washington, I need to tell you something, and I hope you'll let this happen. Michael Henderson contacted us after your video went viral. He asked if he could meet you. He has something he wants to show you. Dorothy's face went pale. I don't want to see him. There's nothing to say. I think there is, please. Will you let him come out? Dorothy looked at the shoebox, at 50 years of proof, at the evidence of her dignity. Then she nodded. All right. Michael Henderson walked onto the stage. He was 45 years old, white, with his father's same build but a different expression. Where his father had been hard, Michael looked pained. He carried a manila folder. Mrs. Washington, he said quietly, thank you for agreeing to see me. Dorothy didn't respond, just looked at him. This man who represented a lifetime of suspicion. I saw your video. I had no idea. No idea my father had treated you that way. No idea you'd been keeping receipts for 50 years because of him. Michael's voice cracked. And then I found something. After my father died, I was cleaning out his office at the store. There were files, old files, and I found this. He opened the manila folder and pulled out a yellowed piece of paper, a letter. Dated May 1973, addressed to the Riverside Elementary School Board. Would you like me to read it? Michael asked. Dorothy nodded, unable to speak. Michael began. To whom it may concern. This letter is in reference to Miss Dorothy Washington, who has applied for a teaching position at Riverside Elementary. Miss Washington frequents my establishment, Henderson's Market, and I feel obligated to share my observations. I do not believe Miss Washington has the character required to teach our children. On multiple occasions, I have had to remind her to pay for her purchases, and I question her honesty and integrity. I cannot in good conscience recommend her for employment in our school system. Sincerely, Robert Henderson. The studio went completely silent. Dorothy sat frozen, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. He tried to stop you from becoming a teacher, Michael said, tears in his eyes, because he thought you were a thief, because you were black. and he wrote this letter and sent it to the school board. Did they? Dorothy couldn't finish the question. They almost didn't hire you. I found the school board minutes. They debated your application for weeks. This letter nearly destroyed your career before it started. But the principal at Riverside, a woman named Margaret Chen, fought for you. She wrote a rebuttal. She said you'd been her student teacher and that you were one of the most honest, dedicated people she'd ever met. She threatened to quit if they didn't hire you. So they did. Barely. By one vote. Dorothy was crying now, 50 years of pain pouring out. I never knew. Mrs. Chen never told me. She probably didn't want you to know how close it was, how much my father tried to ruin you. Michael knelt down beside Dorothy's chair. Mrs. Washington, my father was wrong. He was cruel. He was racist. And he tried to destroy your life because of his prejudice. I am so, so sorry. Why are you telling me this? Dorothy asked. Why now? Because you spent 50 years keeping receipts to prove you weren't a thief. But you were never a thief. You were always a teacher, always worthy, always enough. And I needed you to know that my father's opinion of you was never the truth. It was his racism, his failing, not yours. Michael stood. I'm closing Henderson's Market. Dorothy looked up sharply. What? I can't run a business built on my father's racism. I can't profit from the place where you had to prove your innocence for 50 years, so I'm closing it. And I'm donating the building to the community. David spoke up. Michael, tell Mrs. Washington what you want to do with the building. Michael looked at Dorothy. I want to turn it into a community center, a place for after-school programs, tutoring, job training, all the things our town needs. And I want to name it after you, the Dorothy Washington Community Center, because you spent 50 years teaching children despite what my father tried to do to you. That's the legacy that should be remembered, not his. Dorothy couldn't speak. She looked at the shoebox, at the receipts, at the evidence she'd carried for half a century. I kept these because I thought I needed them. I thought without them no one would believe me. We believe you, Michael said. Everyone who saw your video believes you. And I'm going to make sure everyone in our town knows what my father did. And what you survived. David addressed the audience. Mrs. Washington kept receipts for 50 years because being black in America meant she needed evidence of her innocence. She needed insurance against accusations that came just from existing in a white space. That's not just her story. That's the story of millions of black Americans who keep receipts, who keep tags, who keep proof because they know one accusation without evidence can destroy everything. He turned back to Dorothy. But here's what your story also shows. You didn't just survive. You became a teacher anyway. For 50 years, you taught children. How many students did you have? I stopped counting after 1,000, Dorothy said softly. 1,000 lives you touched. 1,000 children who learned from you. And you did that while carrying this box, while carrying the knowledge that someone tried to stop you. You did it anyway. Dorothy looked at Michael. Your father tried to destroy me, but Mrs. Chen saved me, and I spent 50 years trying to honor that gift, trying to be the teacher she believed I could be. You succeeded, Michael said, and now maybe you can stop keeping the receipts. Maybe you can let go of the evidence, because everyone knows the truth now. Dorothy touched the shoebox. I don't know if I can. This box has been my protection for so long. It's proof that I survived, that I paid, that I belonged. You always belonged, David said gently. The receipts don't prove that. Your life proves that. 6 months after the Late Show appearance, Henderson's Market closed. The building was renovated and reopened as the Dorothy Washington Community Center. On opening day, Dorothy stood in front of the building where she'd once been accused of stealing and cut the ribbon. Inside, in a display case in the lobby, was the shoebox. Every receipt still there, organized by year, but now there was a plaque next to it. A testament to resilience, why one woman kept proof of her dignity for 50 years. Dorothy still shops for groceries. She goes to the new store that opened 2 miles away, and yes, she still keeps her receipts. Not in a shoebox, just in her purse, like anyone else. but she keeps them nonetheless. Old habits, she tells Maya when her granddaughter asks. Some things you don't forget. But there's a difference now. Dorothy doesn't keep the receipts out of fear. She keeps them out of memory, a reminder that she survived, that she paid for every purchase, every right to exist in spaces that didn't always welcome her, that she earned her place, even when people like Mr. Henderson tried to take it away. The Dorothy Washington Community Center serves 300 children a week. Dorothy volunteers there 3 days a week, tutoring students in reading and math. Many of them are children of her former students, grandchildren of children she taught 40 years ago. Michael Henderson works there too, not as the owner. As a volunteer, he teaches financial literacy, helps kids with college applications, and never misses an opportunity to tell people about his father's racism and Dorothy's resilience. I can't undo what my father did, he tells the students, but I can make sure you know the truth. Mrs. Washington survived my father's cruelty and became a teacher anyway. That's real strength. On the first anniversary of the center's opening, Dorothy brought something to donate to the display. A receipt, but not from Henderson's Market, from Riverside Elementary, her first paycheck, from June 1973, $287.50. She'd kept it all these years. This is what Mr. Henderson tried to stop, she said, placing it next to the shoebox. This is what Mrs. Chen made possible. This is proof that I was always worthy, with or without receipts. David Letterman came to the anniversary celebration. He walked through the center, saw children reading, teenagers studying, families getting help with job applications and food assistance. He saw Dorothy sitting at a table with a 7-year-old boy, helping him sound out words in a picture book. Mrs. Washington, David said, you did it. You took 50 years of pain and turned it into purpose. Dorothy smiled. I didn't do it alone. Mrs. Chen started it by believing in me. Michael finished it by acknowledging his father's wrong. And these children? She gestured to the kids in the center. They're living it. None of them will ever have to keep receipts to prove they belong. That's worth 50 years of carrying a shoebox. The shoebox remains in the display case. Thousands of people have visited to see it, to read the receipts from 1973, 1985, 1998, 2015, 2023, to understand what it meant for a black woman to need that much evidence just to buy milk and eggs. But next to the shoebox now sits something else. Letters, hundreds of them, from black Americans across the country who've shared their own stories, their own receipts, their own proof of dignity. Keep Your Receipts became a movement. Not just literal receipts, but documentation, photos, records, evidence, because Dorothy's story reminded everyone that in a world that assumes guilt, proof of innocence is survival. Dorothy Washington is 74 now. She still teaches, though now it's at the center that bears her name. She still keeps receipts, though now it's a choice, not a necessity. And she still tells her story to anyone who'll listen. I kept receipts for 50 years, she says, but what I was really keeping was my dignity, my proof that I existed, that I paid, that I belonged. And now I don't need a shoebox to prove that. I have something better. I have a legacy. The last receipt in Dorothy's shoebox is from May 13th, 2023, the day before the 50th anniversary of the first one. Henderson's Market, now gone. Purchased milk, bread, eggs, chicken, the same item she'd bought 50 years earlier, paid in cash, $32.47. Dorothy framed it separately and hung it in her living room with a note beneath it. The first receipt was insurance. The last receipt is freedom. Because I finally understand. I never needed to prove I wasn't a thief. The world needed to prove it wasn't blind. And maybe that's the real story. Not about a woman who kept receipts, but about a world that made her feel she had to.